Good afternoon, good morning in some areas, and good evening also in some areas. Because we have now a good presence over here from 48 different countries. Thank you so much to everyone who joined us for this webinar from around the globe. We are very happy to have you here. So let's kick off this session, fruitful session on ESG and its role in the financial ecosystem officially. I'm sure I'm audible and the presentation is very much clear to everyone. This webinar we have arranged with our collaborations in Africa, like Trade Info Group, like Tanzania Institute of Banking and Finance, like TCCI, West African Bankers Association. They all supported us to arranging this webinar. ESG is something that's quite hot after the COP28, which happened in Dubai in last December 2023. Let's begin this presentation. I will just brief you out that who are with us. Mr. Sanjeev Chadda is the chairman of EEL4 Group. We are very lucky that he is with us, and we will brief you about his profile, and definitely he will give us the opening remarks of this wonderful webinar. Then Mr. Marcel Jacob is with us. He is an ESG specialist, and he will brief us on the ESG and in the eye of the investor's point of view, that how investors are looking for investing their green funds into green projects, especially in Africa and other part of the world. Then Mr. Natwara, he is the ESG analyst team, and he will brief out on the methodologies and practices what ICRA is conducting while doing the entity ratings. Ms. Joella McLeod, she is the Chief Operating Officer of ICRA Rating and taking care of the global operations. She will give the closing remarks. Myself, I'm Zishan Khan. I'm the Global General Manager for ICRA, and very closely working with the CEO and CEO for this ICRA's operations. I just want to take you for a quick brief about ICRA. And most of the people, they know about ICRA. ICRA is one of the fastest growing organization, specifically in Africa. We have our physical presence in Tanzania, Uganda, Zimbabwe, Zambia. Dubai is the head office operating, managing all the operations for ICRA for credit ratings and ESG entity ratings. Besides that, we have presence in United Kingdom and Spain as well, which allow ICRA to connect with the global investors around the globe and the financial institutions, and we are helping African institutions to connect with the global world. How ICRA forms? ICRA came into the picture where we feel that there is a big gap left by the big players of the market, or can say by not as a target audience, or the African entities are not able to reach out to them, or high cost, whatever the cost is. But ICRA is there to provide its all support to all level of entities, small, medium, emerging corporates, financial institutions, insurance companies, exchange houses, microfinance institutions. ICRA is providing its credit rating and ESG rating services to them. The promoter, Mr. Sanjeev Chadda, definitely we are very happy and we are very lucky that he is with us today. And I will request Mr. Sanjeev Chadda to please come up and give your opening remarks to this wonderful webinar.
Hello, good day to everyone. I think ICRA chose a very nice topic, and the other fellow directors told me to say something about my experience and about ICRA. Basically, my name is Sanjeev Chadda. I'm the group chairman of yield group of company. ICRA also fall. We have about 100 companies across globe. We have offices across globe. I'm a mechanical engineer by profession, then masters in production technology, then I'm a certified quality management system certification auditor, environmental auditor, social accountability auditor. I have done lot of certification programs on environment, quality, occupational health and safety. I done about 13 years of experience from 85 to 98. In 98, I started my business from my home, very humble beginning. And the first business was on certification and training organization, certifying the corporates, the organization across globe on quality management, environmental management, social accountability, health safety, food safety. We done about 7,000 certification across globe. NASA was one of the clients, Central Bank of India, almost all banks of India, education. We covered almost all sector. In 2006, we grew a lot, and Moody International approached us for the acquisition. And we got a very good offer, and there was a successful sales agreement for a 3 years period. I was the CEO for 3 years period, and we done a successful acquisition. After that, we ventured into many things like education, manufacturing, infrastructure, IT, testing, many things. Then in 2012, we ventured into finance. At the moment, we have three verticals. One is like ICRA, credit rating agency. Another is banking and finance. Third is IT. And as I told you, we have offices across the globe like North America, Europe, Middle East, Asia, Africa. And the today's subject, the importance of ESG, the ICRA choose a very relevant subject, ESG and its role in finance ecosystem. Being a quality, environmental and social accountability auditor, see, environment is a big issue. If we don't take care of these environmental, health, social accountability, a day is not far when school kids are going to the school with the oxygen cylinder on their back along with the school bag. Then if recently I was going through, a lot of incident happened, floods in UAE, a gas leak in Bahrain, a fire in India. These are all environmental impacts of if we are not taking care of the environmental aspects, the air pollution, the quality of air which we inhale, the health issues comes if we don't do proper irrigation and agriculture with the polluted water. So is the accountability of everyone to take care of the social accountability, the working condition in the organizations, the forced labor, the child labor, the environmental aspects. Even we have a lot of today, the participants are from the banking sector. So while giving funding, we should take care whether these companies have proper ESG rating, they are taking care of the environmental aspects, social aspects, the governance proper, there's no terrorism funding, there's no bribery, political funding. So it's the role and responsibility of each and everyone. So with this small, I think I will hand over to Jishan. So there are other speakers to talk on other environment or funding or every other aspects. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Sanjeev. Thank you so much for your kind words. And we are very blessed that we have such an experienced a chief gardener with us who are guiding us all the way and helping us with his experience, lifetime experiences, knowledge, and we are performing in these sectors with his help. Thank you so much, Arvind. Now, these are the points what we are going to cover up in our today's session because it is ESG is such a huge topic that we cannot cover it in this one sitting, right? I'm sure everyone will agree with me. So this is the first chapter that okay we are, because we have different level, attendees from different backgrounds. So we want to keep it in a way that it will be beneficial and fruitful for everyone. So we are starting from the grassroots level, understanding about the ESG, what ESG is, why ESG rating comes in, what are their requirements, how it will benefit everyone, how the entities, even financial institutions or corporates or government projects, everywhere it is a requirement of funding, and then there is a lot of requirement. The investors are quite keen in some areas for the green sustainable funding. So that's all we will cover over there. And then uh, we have distributed into 3 chapters. The upcoming chapters in May and June will go beyond that about different more in detail on that one. So these are the areas where we'll discuss about the ESG methodology and process of ICRA. After that, there will be a question and answer session as well. Please note down your queries and questions during the presentations, and then in question and answer sessions, our respected speakers, Mr. Marcel and Mr. Vora, they will answer your all queries, whatever question comes in your mind related to the topic. Please feel free to come out and speak out and make your understanding better and make this webinar fruitful for everyone. Mr. Marcel, what I will say about you, it is better that you will speak yourself, that what you are, from where you are, your experiences, and then we will kick off your presentation, sir. Over to you, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Zishan, for the introduction, and welcome everybody to join this webinar on ESG in relationship to the investor world. So good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are. Thank you for joining. My name is Marcel. Like Zishan already mentioned, I have more than 20 years experience in the sustainability ESG space. My background varies from sustainability, green marketing, sustainable and circular procurement, due diligence, all kind of ISO standards, OECD materiality and OSD due diligence. And the last few years more focus on business development from a sustainable or circular perspective. I've worked over 15 years at Royal Philips, 7 years at Office Depot, a few years at Philip Morris, and in 2018, I co-founded together with Monique Schmid Circulate. And what we actually do is we support companies in their journey to become more sustainable. And before we jump into this presentation, I'll give you 2 highlights. It is all about progression and not perfection. That was also part of the title of this presentation, because everybody is on its own journey, independent if you start, independent on your maturity level. And remind yourself that ESG is simple, but not easy. And I will explain that during this presentation. I'll come back to that. But first, let's go to the next slide. What is the value of ESG? So Jishan, can you please? Okay, thanks. So when we look from the African bank or financial perspective, what I did is I put 3 key stakeholders. So it is beyond risk management and compliance. It's actually your license to operate. And if you as a bank or financial institute incorporate ESG, the results, especially the operational effectiveness, is increasing. And that offers you more and more market opportunities. Beyond that, what we noticed is that in 2024, there is an access to capital, especially in the African continent, There was a number going around that in 2024, there's approximately 4.4 billion US dollar available for ESG funds. But if we look on a global context, actually, if we talk to, let's say, institutional investors, the total market value at the moment of ESG related or ESG focused funds, we talk about 41 trillion US dollar. So the financials are linked to the risk management and compliance part of view, but it offers opportunity. So please keep that in mind. When we look to your customers, so I took two highlights out of a recent study. So 71% in Africa, they are more likely to choose banks that have a positive impact. That is quite a significant number. On the downside, actually, is that from a customer retention point of view, 60% of your customer potentially leave if the bank or the financial institution is linked to a negative social or environmental impact. So if you are not aware of what your ESG performance is or your ESG impact is, you don't know how to retain your customers. Two other important stakeholders, your local community, because you have an impact in where you invest, how you behave. So your local communities can immediately benefit from the decisions that you take. The other thing is your own employees. It has been known, and it is also already seen in many other companies, that companies who focus on ESG, they have a higher employee productivity level, a higher satisfaction level, which leads to a better overall performance. So this is just as a starting point. Now, let's move on to what is ESG. So for those who are not familiar with it, Zishan, can you please move to the next slide? So what is ESG? And on the next slide, we actually have a simple visual. So ESG is a common terminology. It's often confused with sustainability, but what we are addressing today is E stands for environmental issues or environmental impact. S stands for the social impact or issues, and governance is all about the governance structure. What are the governance related issues? So if we start first with environment, Zishan, please move to the next slide. So when we look at environmental issues, already Mr. Sanjeev said climate change. We all know there's a lot going on. We talk about greenhouse gas emissions. So how does it impact us on a daily life, but also on the mid and the long term? That's really important to understand. It links to carbon credits. It links to how renewable energy is implemented. When we look to the African continent, resource depletion, resource use, and resources in general, the African continent is one of the richest resource continents on the planet. So we have to find a way to deal with them in the right way. How do we do that? That's part of the environmental issues. We talk about waste and pollution. Many countries outside of Africa actually transported or shipped end-of-life electronics, or let's say old container ships to Africa to be dismantled, or there was not a really clear way to deal with waste in the right way, which ended up with pollution on the African continent. So what can we do together beyond that? How can we collaborate on that area? Deforestation. We know that old growing forests around the world, we cut X amount of sizes of several soccer field pitches a day, which has an impact on the biodiversity, which has an impact on climate change. So ESG is challenging us as a whole because it's not an individual activity. How do we tackle it? What is material on the things that we do from a bank, linked to your customers, linked to your investors? If we move to the next slide, it's all about the social issues. Zishan, can you please move to the next slide? So when we talk about the social issues, it's linked to people. It is how the workforce is satisfied, is happy. What are the working conditions? That's one part of the social issues. Next is you operate as an organization inside a surrounding, which connects with local communities. Sometimes you impact indigenous people. Another important aspect in social issues is linked to human rights, already addressed by Mr. Sanjeev. Human rights linked to discrimination, bribery. How do we deal with each other? What is health and safety? How do we actually take care? How do we make sure that due diligence is done in a proper way to safeguard these human rights? We talk about humans in this case. So employee relationships, think about diversity and inclusion. But last but not least, data security and data privacy is becoming more and more important. Look at the European GDPR, the regulations that actually make sure that companies are not abusing the data of an individual and that they keep track of it in appropriate ways. Which brings me actually to the third topic. Shishan, can you please move to the governance one? So governance is actually the framework who keeps everything together. So when we talk about environmental and social issues, there is also a kind of structure around it that safeguards that the policies, that the ambition are executed in the right way. That's one part of the governance, so implemented in your organization. But on top of that, we talk also about, for example, the independence of the board. So how do you avoid conflict of interest? What is the structure of the board? How is the diversity of the board? When we talk about shareholder rights, so how can they influence the direction of the company? When we talk about bribery and corruption, or how do we actually do lobbying in the right way? How do we deal with donations? And something that is put more on the agenda the last few years, which gets higher, is tax strategy. Some companies are evading taxes to pay them in certain countries. So there's a lot going on in that area. And at the end, of course, compensation policies. Equal pay, some countries are way ahead of that. Other countries have to step up. That counts not only on national level in the public sector, but even in the private sector, all these elements are very relevant. So this is just a high-level glimpse of what ESG is. Remember, environment, social, and governance issues. That brings me to the link. Okay, how do you actually visualize that, or how do you quantify that? So ESG fits in the bigger picture, and that's why we have this picture. It shows you the 17 SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. These have been developed by a huge stakeholder consultation. What does it mean? There were international foundations, local authorities, national authorities, public sector, private sector, non-governmental organizations, civil society. They all came together because they were not speaking the same language. There was an urgent need to bring things together. So these 17 elements have a clear definition, clear explanation, and criteria how to measure them, which means if companies are picking one or more of these SDGs that are material to them, or at national level, countries are reporting all 17 and how they progress year after year after year on these topics. So ESG is actually intertwined with these 17 SDGs, which is really important because that is at the core of setting up the criteria, understanding where you are, how you improve, which ultimately leads to ratings. Because if we go to the next section of this presentation, why ESG rating? Because you need to have a framework. So if you use these SDG goals, Sishan, can you please move to the next slide? So if we talk about these SDGs, you want to measure, you want to identify where you are, you want to benchmark where you are. So ESG rating becomes very interesting, not only from the benchmarking perspective, but from the investor perspective. So if we move to the next slide, I'll guide you a little bit on what is relevant. So see at a global scale the number of sustainability regulations that are popping in. And this is just a snapshot. And you see there's a lot of numbers in the European area, there are a lot of numbers in the North American, we see something in Australia, we see one dot in South Africa. But if we bring it down, it actually comes down to a few elements. There are a lot of legislations linked to reporting. So there's an increase in how to report, what needs to be reported. Then there are a few directives that are specific, addressing specific topics. Think about child labor, forced labor, modern slavery. These are very topic-specific directives. And then the third one is it's linked to supply chain due diligence, because even if you have a country or you have a region, as soon as you implement these kind of ESG-related directives, you impact the global supply chain, because raw materials are coming from all around the globe, and they end up maybe in Europe, in North America, in Australia, wherever. They have an impact. So it is all about taking the responsibility as a producer, as a supply chain partner, to keep these regulations into account. And that is part of your risk management. That is part of setting your ambitions. How do you move forward? Where are the risks? What can I do to improve my supply chain upstream? Which brings me to a nice example how, for example, Europe, which is on the next slide. So what Europe actually did is they created the Green Deal. And the Green Deal is actually supported by three core elements. They have the EU taxonomy, which defines what is sustainable, what means sustainable business. They have the UN guiding principles on, for example, human rights, and the OECD guidelines for multinational enterprises, which are at the core. And on the left-hand side of these principles, we see the CSDD is on due diligence, is actually the input on what is going on in the supply chain or the value chain, because it's not only upstream, it's also downstream. And the CSRD is actually about disclosing. It's what you report. What have you done? How have you done it? What are your decisions? What are your risks? All those kind of things together. So they actually support the ambition of the Green Deal, whether it's carbon neutrality, plastic-free world, everything comes together. And at the end, the Green Deal can raise ambitions over time, because the more insights they get via this combination of the CSDD and the CSRD, the better they can steer their ambition. So this is more an example on how Europe did. Now, one important topic is about climate change. So when we look on the next slide, it is an example on the global race to net zero. Everybody's talking about carbon neutrality, carbon reduction, carbon credits. If we look to this arch, we see that there is a huge area which is light blue, which is also reflected in the world map. All these countries that are listed there have set themselves to be carbon neutral by 2050. On the left-hand side, at the beginning of the arch, we see that a few countries are more ambitious. So, for example, Suriname and Bhutan, they already claim that they are carbon neutral. But if we look at Uruguay, Finland, Austria, Iceland, and Germany, they are, apologies, they are ahead of the curve. But we also have some laggers. So on the right-hand side, we see countries like Australia and Singapore, they target somewhere between 2050 and 2100. And 2060 is important for China, Kazakhstan, and Ukraine. So independent where you are, you can set yourself a target to become carbon neutral. But the target needs to be transposed in actions between now and then. And that's where the ESG agenda can help you to set those targets, to build this milestone, and then use the rating to measure the progress against a credible standard. So when we move to the next slide, it is all about where are the benefits in ESG ratings for developing countries. So ultimately, it results in a better protection of the human rights and the it also increases the stakeholder awareness, because not everybody is on the same page. So the more organizations start to talk about ESG, about sustainability, what is material to them, they increase that awareness. So that brings a dialogue. It attracts sustainable investment. It results in long-term projects. It also ensures that there is an increased take-up of the international standards, because everything ultimately comes together. But even the most important thing is that people improve their living conditions, and that's where everybody has an impact. So like Mr. Sanjeev said, it's not a single issue, it's an urgent need to collaborate, and everybody has a contribution to that agenda. Which brings me to the benefits of applying the ESG rating. So, Mr. Zishan, can we please move to the next slide and even go beyond this one? So, when we look at the recent Bloomberg study, and I will just pick these are just a few highlights, but what is the message behind this slide? ESG is picking up in investments around the globe. And it doesn't matter if it is the awareness, if it is the sustainable investment market. So if we look at the middle, for example, where the UAE, the UK, and China as lead markets, already when you look at sustainable investment, more than 75% of their investment portfolio is seeing ESG as a high priority. If we look back over the past 10 years, so in 2014, less than 30% was considering ESG as part of their investment portfolio. So use it as a credibility, as a part of a rating. In 2024, so this year already globally, 50% of the investments is taking ESG into consideration. Even the big ones like BlackRock have dedicated ESG investment managers. So I personally expect that by 2030, close to 100% of the investment has one or any kind of ESG into the rating. So it means we cannot deny it anymore. It is become a mainstream topic. So when we move to the next slide, so more from the African perspective, I have here an example. So this is a study done by PwC last year. They have been talking to 282 sub-Saharan African CEOs, and what they reflected, so as key priorities, they are looking to become more purpose-driven companies, which means create and leverage ESG strategies that create value and build trust. The second key priority is about climate change and social risk. It's all about addressing climate risk and social impact. It is not seeing environment issues separate from the social issue, because when there is a flooding, when there is a dryness, whatever, it impacts local society. So these things become more material, more integrated, which means the third key priority is they are looking for opportunities for ESG investment, ESG projects, whether it's renewable energy, whether it's social investments like micro credits. We cannot ignore it anymore. So this is a very good example. If we look on the next slide, what is it that the investors are looking for? So how can you actually attract investors? Put yourself in the shoes of the investor. So if we look at these bullets, the investors want to align with their ESG goals. So if you know what's material for you and you can clarify that, and when you talk to the investors, the better you match, the easier it is to attract those specific investors. That means you need to understand where is the impact, what are the metrics that you're going to measure. Of course, you will build reputation over time, and the same counts for transparency, especially when you start today or tomorrow. You don't have that reputation yet. But what you can do from day one is you can build transparency. And that also reflects in the risk-adjusted returns on the long term. What is really important to keep in mind is when you start building the framework, when you have your ambition, when you implement the ESG in your core processes, you are looking for certification and verification to meet certain standards. because investors want to have that credibility. They want to know where you are, against what standards are you actually reporting. Another important aspect that they're looking for is scalability. It's not just a one-time effort. They want to make sure that you go for the long term, for longevity. All these points that I addressed so far require stakeholder engagement. It is not just your organization. You need to talk to your partners, to your customers, to your investors, to local authorities, to national authorities. It requires a regular engagement and communication with your stakeholders. Tie your investors in that. They can bring new things to the table. They can bring other networks to the table. If we talk about regulatory support and incentives, what tax incentives are there? What regulatory incentives are there? How can you both benefit from that? Secondary market liquidity. What is the long-term benefit of investing in these kind of green bonds or, for example, clean development mechanism projects? And of course, they want to diversify their portfolio, and it needs to fit in their portfolio. So not only focus on what is relevant for you, but look for the connections. How can you attract the right investors? And we can help you in that space. So that is actually, if you understand how to attract the investors, then on the next slide, we actually also address the challenges that you have to be aware of. So you need to raise awareness and set education within your own company. That means on all levels, you have to make people aware what is ESG, what is important for your company, how do you address it to your customers, what is material. The second bullet is data availability and the quality of the data, because if you do data collection in not appropriate or the proper way, a rater and an auditor will fail you on that point. But there are ways to improve. There are standard ways to collect the data to make sure that you have the robust process in place, that you collect the data in the right way. The third bullet is make sure you integrate it into the business strategy, implement it in the core processes. It is not just a nice to have. It's not somewhere a department in the building. You have to integrate it in your daily activities. Another important challenge is, of course, there are short-term benefits, the quick wins, but keep in mind the long-term goals that support your long-term ambition to make sure that you keep that goal, target that long-term goal. Like I already said, it's about stakeholder engagement and stakeholder communication. Do it on a regular basis. Be not afraid to be transparent, share your learnings, but also your challenges within your own organization. Of course, regulatory uncertainty. Not every area is already regulated. Be aware, join your peers, and make things happen together, because together you move things faster, you move forward. Risk assessment and materiality. That is actually at the core when you develop your approach, when you move ahead, where you differentiate yourself from your competition. In the beginning, I said, ESG is simple, but not easy. And that comes to behavioral change and cultural shift. Because if you keep doing tomorrow what you did yesterday, things will not change. So ESG as a concept is simple because it's not really weird rocket science. We all can easily understand it. But we deal with people, internal your organization, with your customers, with your partners, with your investors. That is the not easy part. And that's where stakeholder engagement and communication comes in. The last two bullets, measuring impact and attribution. Yeah, if you want to show progress, you need to measure and you need to attribute it. And keep in mind, there will always be external dependencies that have an impact on what you do and how you progress. So let's go to two examples. So on the next slide, sorry, this is an example. So it's called the Alliance for Green Infrastructure in Africa. It's launched by the African Development Bank Group. And at the COP28, they raised $175 million recently, and their target is 500 million to raise. Their key priority is it's all about green infrastructure. Think about sustainable projects in the area of energy, transport, water. The financing is investment opportunities for green projects. And the target areas, actually, it's across the whole African continent. So just, you can Google this, and you can find more information, what you need to do and how to apply for it. So one case study that we would like to address, which is on the next slide, is where we work together with a group of investors. So we are connected, so Circulate and ICRA, we are connected to a group of investors. They are based in Sweden, Dubai, and Abu Dhabi. And the minimum project size is $100 million. They currently have an available fund range of around $2 billion. We are focusing on solar panel, let's say, areas, or geothermal. The regions that we target is the African continent and Brazil, and we mainly focus on power purchase agreements. And actually what I would like to do right now is to this audience is a call for projects. You might have been approached recently by projects that are in this area. And if we can connect them to the Clean Development Mechanism, and we connect them to the UN FCC criteria, which is the UN guidelines on climate change, we can bring money to the table. So please, if you have any potential projects, reach out to me or to Zishan or to Sanjeev or to your local contact from ICRA, because we can help you to really make things happen. And if we move to the next slide, ESG rating benefits, because to get that money that we just talked about, we need ESG ratings. Because if you show the progress and if you meet the minimum criteria, you will be able to attract investors. You show that you have good risk management in place. You can build on the stakeholder trust and you'll increase your reputation. You have competitive advantage. You can be beyond regulatory compliance. And you create long-term value. Which brings me to the next slide. There is a different framework. So if we look at how ESG is actually monitored and managed, when we look at SASB or GRI, that are really standard. So the sustainable accounting is the SASB, GRI is the Global Reporting Index. If we look at the Dow Jones, they actually are benchmarking companies in different industries, even the banking sector, on a subset of indicators. But if we talk about rating, then we talk about the Moody's, the MSCI, the ICRA, or the S&P Global. And after my part, the ICRA team will take over and explain way more in detail what it means and how you can benefit from them. But before I hand over to them, I have one last slide, which is actually what is next. So in May, we will host a webinar with the ESG investor where they share their detailed perspectives, why we focus on carbon credits, and how we can benefit from the Clean Development Mechanism. If you, after this webinar, want to know more about ESG, about these projects, or you need some further guidance on how to kickstart your ESG, we can schedule a call one-on-one with you for 30 minutes where we explore your specific needs and we identify your areas of improvement, or we help you to get started. And in June, we will create another webinar on how you, in 8 steps, create a solid ESG foundation. So let me recap. ESG is but not easy. It's about progression and not perfection. You can start actually today. Show your commitment, and you already showed commitment by joining this webinar. And before I close, you will be successful when you have a clear strategy, when you are committed, you have an ambition, you create an action plan, you collaborate, It's simple. Keep that in mind. So I would like to thank you, and I now hand over back to Zishan and the team for the remaining part of this webinar. Thank you for joining.
Thank you, Marcel. Thank you so much for this information and presentation. But stay with us. There, I'm sure there is a list of questions after the session, which for that I would like to invite Mr. Nakbora. He joined ICRA's team very recently. Well, what I tell about him, he's also having a decade of experiences. He's an ex-banker, and you can imagine that being a banker, he has done some good loans, project financing, fossil fuel projects, and then he witnessed that how the investors and the other entities, they have shifted their methodologies, their view towards sustainable, green, environmental friendly project. So I would request now Mr. Nakbora to come, just brief about yourself. It is good to hear directly from the horse's mouth, and then we'll start our extra presentation and methodologies. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Zishan, for that wonderful introduction, and thank you everyone for being here today. I hope you guys could hear me clearly. So we're going to talk about the process and how to go about getting an ESG rating. The next slide, Zishan, please. So what the ICRA rating gives you is basically brings credibility and trustworthiness to your ESG efforts and journey. It enhances your organizational reputation, saying that you are focused on progressing towards more sustainable processes and more ESG friendly measures. Also, an ESG rating allows your lender to have greater assurance, more confidence that you are managing your ESG risks quite well. And as we see, there are more and more guidelines and requirements that are developing, as Marshall explained, SASB, GRI, ICRA, etc. This will help you stay ahead of the changing ESG guidelines, because the ESG rating is a continued journey. As Marshall again said, it's not about perfection, it's about progression. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So what, no, the previous, sorry. Now, what is ESG? Yeah, what is ESG? Right? We talked about it right at the beginning of the presentation. ESG represents environmental, social, and governance. Together, they have become a very important non-financial criteria that all businesses are expected to respect and adhere to. Basically, what it tells about you is that you are looking at the significant material risks that your business faces in the long term. The ESG criteria is also becoming a large tool in the portfolios of investors looking to invest in different projects. Just as my colleague Marcel said here, that if you have lead projects and you have ICRA rating, just makes your journey towards getting financing easier, right? And there are different standards like the Sustainability Development Goals, the Principles of Responsible Investment, which is basically a network of institutions that is supported by the US. And all of this will allow you to benefit. And that's why we recommend that you should start, at least if you haven't already, your journey towards sustainability and ESG. Next slide. What are the criteria within each of these areas, right? Environmental criteria. What are the environmental criteria? Your climate strategy. What kind of energy consumption you have? How do you manage your waste? This is very important for food FMCG companies, for packaging companies, and your environmental efficiency. What are you doing to reduce the impact of your business on the environment? The social criteria, which earlier was defined as corporate social governance. Basically, we're talking about things like diversity and inclusion. What kind of workplace do you offer your employees? What about employee benefits? And how engaged are the stakeholders in this implementation of your social criteria? The governance has become very important, where people are looking at things like board independence. How are the board meeting? Do you have a board chart? Do you have a rules and regulations there? What kind of management oversight do you have within to manage the risks of the company? Cybersecurity, like Smart Cell, and again emphasized things, data privacy and data security are extremely important there as well. And climate-related risks. What are your GHG emissions? How are you managing? What are you doing to reduce these emissions? That's what falls in. Next slide, please. So why Africa? Because we have experience in Africa. We have our feet on the ground in Africa. We understand Africa better than most others. We offer a trusted name, credibility, and we will take you with us on the journey of having really strong ethics, governance, policies, procedures, and the way these are managed. Next slide, please. I've got something blocking my here. So what is ICRA, ESG? Basically, it's a holistic process that allows stakeholders to have greater confidence in your ESG efforts. It highlights the fact that there is management and stakeholder engagement and readiness to manage the ESG risks. It gives an assurance that your ESG compliance, readiness, and exposure are on the lookout and are being managed. Thirdly, it also talks about the transparency. How transparent are you in relating back to the people? The more transparent you are, the greater the amount of trust you're going to get. And the one thing about ICRA is we need to understand that different countries and different sectors need some specific type of assessment and structure. So we offer that to as well. Next slide, please. What are the benefits of ESG rating? Gives you better flow bank, gives you better cost of debt, opens up greater business opportunities for you and your stakeholders like investors, etc. Investors, lenders, insurance companies, your clients, your supply chain. It gives them greater satisfaction. Next slide, please. So what do I mean by better firm value? Right? Being well rated on ESG and having proper sustainable measures helps you to reduce your cost of capital. Not only that, investors are more willing to invest in these companies. That's why you will be able to get greater valuations or better valuations than you would otherwise. And this is because investors are now more focused on investing in companies that have better, stronger ESG performance. US European exchange traded funds and the ESG linked funds, they have performed much better than the rest of the sectors. All of this shows that it is a very positive and an important, significant association to have an ESG rating. Next slide, please. Better cost of debt. What do I mean by that? Like, as we discussed earlier, there are a lot of financiers, lenders, banks, other institutions who have sustainability-linked loans. And being on the ESG journey, having a good ESG rating allows you to gain access to these funds. Good ESG performance. Why is it important? Because it will also allow you to get better rates. When I say credit spreads rates, why? Because the fact that you're managing your financial risk better, you have greater corporate transparency, and also the greater assurance that these debt lenders have gives them lower costs on their own because the ratios of failure would be lower. Like I said, banks are offering sustainability linked products where they are more willing to lend to companies with specifically set criteria for ESG performance. The better your ESG score, the more likely you are to get lower interest rates and thereby reduce your cost of borrowing. Next slide, please. So how does ESG open up more business opportunities? Right? Basically, as your audience, as your target audience, the client, your investors, stakeholders see you engaging more and contributing positively to society, it would open up new revenue streams because people would now give you greater reputation. ESG, sustainability, and climate solution. These are very important for you to be able to tap into these resources. Now, once you've identified what the core business purpose and how it meets the changing, dynamic, evolving needs of the market, you can customize or tailor solutions that address the pain points. And that is a fresh opportunity as well with a lower competition. Next slide, please. I mean, when you have a structured approach to share information on your ESG efforts, stakeholders would be happier because as more and more people ask for ESG assessment, ESG score, ESG rating, and find that you are progressing on that journey. Like I said, again, it's about progression and not perfection. Being preemptive in the ESG domain, you can offer all of these assurances to your stakeholders and thereby giving them a greater level of satisfaction that they are in the right place with the right partner. Next slide, please. So what do you get being a member and certificate from ICRA? First and foremost, maybe the cost of an assessment might have been a barrier for you, while ICRA offers you a free initial assessment. We also have a process that makes sure you are in control of who is able to see your ratings. We do not do any unsolicited ratings. And on the other hand, we offer lifetime support. We will guide you through the entire journey of your ESG progression. Even if you are right at the start, we will help you go through the journey and reach the higher and higher levels of perfection. And all of this is done based on a detailed ESG assessment. Can we go to the next slide, please? What ICRA, like I said, offers a complete support on any query, any concerns that your stakeholders have. So how does it? Basically, any stakeholder that needs access to clients' ESG ratings and assessment, the client can directly share if they have an ESG rating. Or the client can approach ICRA, authorizing the stakeholder to receive the information from ICRA. Now, if stakeholders do approach us directly, what do we do? Well, our single point of contact will ask for your approval first, after which the stakeholders will get access to the ratings and the detailed assessment. All of this and the transparency and the ease of the approval process will again make your stakeholder much happier, more satisfied. Next slide, please. So what is the ESG ratings methodology? Third-party assessment for transparency, accreditation. We go into the details of the most important topics, critical topics for the company around ESG. We will engage with the company to understand their perspective, bring in their perspective into the assessment. We will basically unify the ESG framework linked with best-in-class methodologies and international standards. Also, this gives you an opportunity to review and clarify so the ESG rating and their respective. What is third party? Why third party assessment? Because it's fair to all without any bias. Also, it gives the stakeholder greater enhanced credibility for what you're telling. It removes conflicts. Obviously, there is no conflict of interest if you're getting it done by a third party, and also lends greater integrity to the process. Can we go to the next slide? What goes into an ESG assessment? We look at everything, right? What are the inputs on the environmental side, on the social side, on the governance side, and additionally, also on business innovation. What are you doing to be different and offer something better? And product innovation. Again, we expect everybody to continuously give us better and better products. Now, we do understand that, like I said earlier, there could be country-specific standards, sector-specific standards. They cannot be mixed up, right? Because at the end of the day, every industry has a different requirement, different way of being assessed. We have like global standards, like the GRI, SASB, materiality assessment, which basically allows one to look at how material, the most material and significant and critical parts to your business are taken care of. And again, it is also tailored to company-specific requirements. So what is your company size? What is the revenue of the company? Who are the people you work with? Who are the people you work for? Next slide. So here's what happens, right? You come to ICRA, you get a initial assessment done. If your score is below the minimum threshold, then we work with you to improve the base understanding. We give you a report and the key measures to it. Subsequently, you will have a second assessment after you've done some of these measures. And now we assume that if you're over the minimum threshold, then we engage in a full ESG assessment process done by third party. And after that, ESG assessment basis we will do assessment till you get to where you want. Next slide. So, like I said, we offer free initial assessment. I told you what that is. We said, we have sectoral initiatives because we do understand different sectors have different requirements. We look at the material, more significant topics within the governance issues or the governance of your company. We look at how ready is the management, what is management readiness? How do the country regulations work for your particular destination? Right? If there have been any negative news, how do you manage it? What was the negative risk all about? And again, like I said before, we do not do unsolicited ratings. Can we go to the next slide? Now, these are all the documentations that go into it. But the way the process is, disclosures, based on the disclosures, we do a gap assessment. On the gap assessment, we give you a policy with what is required, what needs to be done, and how it should. Make sure that a live action is being done. See the impact of those actions, and then measure them against specific KPIs and targets. And like we said before, it's important to understand and measure because you want to show progression. You will not be able to show progression if you don't have benchmarks and measure yourself against that and the impact of your actions. Again, then we go into this circle of disclosures and a continuous improvement by way of any additional gap assessments and go on. Next slide, please. So what are the elements we look at ICRA for ESG? Public disclosure, of course, right? Public disclosure is what You are sharing openly with the communities, the policies, performance, and procedures with the general public. Basically, public disclosure and transparency just goes hand in hand, right? It is very important. Public disclosure, no, previous, I haven't yet finished that, sorry. Public disclosure is ultimately essential in the process of ESG rating, yeah, right? Because it gives the stakeholders the necessary information they need to see your commitment towards sustainability. Being transparent means, like I said earlier, just being open and accountable. It allows for greater credibility, investor confidence, compliance, and long-term career validation. Now we can go to the next slide, Zishan, please. Certifications, right? How do certifications help you? You get better investor confidence, increased brand value and reputation, and better access to capital because you are showing yourself as a resident company. Basically, the certifications provide a very robust framework for assessing a company's sustainability efforts and practices, right? Gives you greater enhanced credibility. And as we spoke, as in one of Marshall's slides, it showed that there is a greater reliance from the customers also on how responsible and ethical you are as a business. Also shows the management ratings, right? Companies that have transparency benefit, as I said earlier, with better risk management, investor confidence, regulatory compliance, and of course, long-term sustainability and validation. Next slide. So let's move on. See, environmental risk can be very important for a company. It can be high, or like any other risk, you need to assess it as at a low, high, or a medium on the matrix. And understanding these risks is important because it allows us to manage this. Now, if you're going to build a manufacturing facility next to a dam in a flood-prone area, then that's a very critical decision you need to make, right? Or how do you protect yourself against impacts if you are based in a high tornado or whatever, where the areas where these kind of natural elements are more likely to happen. The country's ratings, like how committed is the government, the rulers of the country, to show their commitment towards sustainability. Basically, it will show a holistic in how well positioned is the country and its people to navigate and thrive in diverse regulatory, social, economic landscape across different countries. Next slide. Of course, we have to take the size of the country into relevance. Countries are all the, basically placed into three categories: developed, developing, and underdeveloped. A country's commitment and stand on ESG as well as guidelines and provisions is linked with its size. A larger country, the larger population will have to target it differently as against a smaller company with a smaller population. Underdeveloped countries might not have concrete structures like the developed countries do, but we have to look at all of them. And then again, from the country, you move to the company. The company size is important. Companies can be, again, small, medium, large, depending on the number of people, the revenues, and their scale of operations. The risks faced and their commitment to sustainability will vary with the size of the organization. Next slide, please. So when you look at this slide, please don't get too worried, because again, this is not like a credit rating that if you are in the red zone, you cannot get credit. ESG ratings are a continued progressive journey. And even if you begin at a C, we are there to guide you through the journey, along with independent assessments and things like that, to take you to as best as possible and where you wish to make a AAA. So important, ESG ratings are not credit ratings, they are different. Credit ratings measure the risk a bank faces when financing you. ESG rating shows your commitment to risk and risk management. Next slide, please. That's it. I'm done for the day. and you can shoot questions. Please shoot more at Marcel than me, so that I don't have to worry about it.
Thank you,
Don't shoot the
Nat. Thank
messenger.
you so much. Yes, please. I'm sure Nat and Marcel, you are following the chat box. And I also request our all participants to raise their hands. You can ask questions directly with our experts, with everyone. Our chairman, Mr. Sanjeev Sharda, is with us as well. Every kind of a question, any level of question is welcome. Feel free and come out and speak out, please. Yes,
I think
we have Mr. Ajay who has a question. Oh, he's giving the appreciation. Thank you. Yes, presentations will be shared to all the registered members. We have their email addresses and we will send them a thank you pack with the link of the presentation recording and presentation as well. Yes, sure, we will.
Zishan, I saw a question, somebody asking, please explain SASP standards to us. Well, it's not such a simple and easy process, and it's not like something that can be done in a couple of minutes or 5 minutes. We may consider these kind of requests to have separate webinars, but we have to look at that. We cannot do that in about 5 minutes now, unless Marcel knows how to explain those in about 5 minutes.
Yeah, and I'll try to do it in 1 minute. It's actually the SASB has their standard accounting standards that they rate, and what they did is on top of that they added the ESG package, where ESG topics that we actually addressed in this presentation are rated against their standard. So indeed, it takes a bit more time to explain it in detail, but it's an additional set of questions on top of it.
Oh, very right. SASB here, just to add on, there are some frameworks in the world. So basically, there are two types of reports in ESG. It works. One is the investor-faced report, and one is the public-faced reports over there. So there are different frameworks, GRI and SASB. They are mostly used, as Marcel said, for accounting, finance side, for the investor point of view. The investor read reports are based on those frameworks, and the other frameworks are some of the frameworks are utilized for the public-faced reporting as well. So these are the frameworks which are international standards. And ICRA being an accrediting and most connected with the financial sector. So that's how we use SASB and the other frameworks which are mostly utilized for the investor-faced reports. I can see there is another question that Mr. Pawan he asked. What is the difference between assurance of the sustainability report and ESG rating?
So I guess the two different things are the rating is a result of all of the assessment that we do. And the assurance is where we are assessing where you are with your journey in ESG, what stage you are, what have you done, where you are at. And that translates into the rating on that chart from C to A. Marcel?
Yeah, and on top of that, so your company sustainability report is often a combination of the financial and the non-financial indicators, and you actually choose yourself what kind of reporting framework you use. So you can use the GRI or you have your own set, where the ESG rating is using a predefined set of criteria, and it's done also by an independent body linked to that criteria set. And like I said, it's mainly linked to the investors, where the company sustainability report is actually for the broad audience available. So I hope that answers the question.
Thank you, Marcel and Nat. Then we have a lot of thanks from Ingrid, if I'm pronouncing your name. Thank you so much. Kilna, I wish more stakeholders would participate in such webinars. I'm sure because this is our first chapter and more chapters are coming, and we are sure that we will have those one. Naomi said, can the Global Reporting Initiative, GRI standards, be used to report on ESG comprehensively?
Well, I mean, as Marcel already answered that question. Each of these standards have slightly different angles to it. So the SASB is more related from a financial point of view, and the GRI are more holistic, comprehensive view on that. So there, you can't take only one standard and say, is it going to be comprehensive? It depends on what the outlook is, what that particular report is, standards are being used for what purpose. That's the way I would answer that question. So anyway, like I said, SAFP are more investor oriented.
Very rightly said. As you said, there are some areas where the analytics team, they have to combine different frameworks because the investors are having some areas to look into that one. And then, as we said, there is a geographical need, there is a sectorial need. Yeah. There is the purpose of that reports that all combine. So these all frameworks, which are the global standards, that should be combined, and then the different rating agencies like ICRA, like Moody's, or they utilize those frameworks, standards to generate those reports. Thank you, Mildred. Robert, is the question from Robert Combo. Is ESG rating mandatory in some of the countries, or it is just optional? If it is mandatory, are there any laws that bind financial institutions?
So I can answer from my side that yes, in some places they are mandatory. For example, in Oman, the Muscat Stock Exchange has recently made it mandatory and released the guidelines. It's mandatory for all listed companies to submit an ESG report along with their year-end report. And optional, I mean, yeah, it depends on what your definition of optional. For me, it's not optional because at the end of the day, as the ecosystem around you is developing, the investors, the stakeholders, the banks, your clients, your customers, if you want to stay ahead of the game, it's not optional. But yeah, if there's nobody forcing you to do it, unless and until that particular country or the institution has laid out the law that you need to have mandatory reporting along these standards with this kind of a framework criteria every year with your financials.
Thanks, Dan. And I will also just highlight, Marcel, please correct me, that the Netherlands governments, they are working on that thing. I think you're also associated with that thing, that all the imports from 60 countries, if you put some light on that side. And the COP30, I think that one I will leave it with you, Marcel. And the second point is that in COP28, many financial institutions has participated, and many regulators, central banks around the globe, they are now quite taking actions, preliminary actions on that side. And I'm not sure, but I heard, someone can correct me as well, that the next COP30, which is going to be happen in Saudi Arabia, they will make it as a regulatory requirement in some of the areas of financial requirements or funding requirements. But over to you, Marcel, if you can put some light on this upcoming, the futuristic things which are coming up in the next 1 or 2 years.
Yeah, so the ESG rating is not yet mandatory, but if you look to the European directive on reporting, they push companies to actually start reporting about the non-financial performance. So that's the first step. And what we sense is that some countries are looking for, okay, what are credible schemes to do a rating and a comparison point of view. And I'm currently involved in one research project to identify how would you actually identify the due diligence performance in the supply chain of a company when you as a public sector are actually buying from those companies. So everything is in an early stage, and I think things start to become more together. So the puzzle pieces are shaped, but the puzzle is not ready yet. Let's put it in that way.
Very rightly said. It's a big one, especially the scope 3, where all the vendors, all members in supply chain, they must be, in that size, the sustainability, even in fact, not only you and in this, wherever you are based in your supply chain. So your left and right, everything should be connected. It's a big project, but this is the start of this thing, as everyone said, and it is coming towards us. So it is a good time to prepare ourselves for this change. So we can walk through with the world all together. Thank you so much, Aneet. Very familiar name. Can you talk a bit about IFRS framework? Yes, I will leave it with Nat and Marcel, but very recently, what is my limited knowledge about that one? That TCFD has done their work, and now they have given it to IFRS over there. So might be the scope 4, which is a carbon handprint, we are calling about that one, the risk of due to the climate changes. So yes, it is something developing over there. I leave it with Nat and Marcel to just put some light on that one, because it is something that is very recent and very new, that the FRS also is working on that side.
So just to give guidance to the companies and investors, IFRS has the International Sustainability Standards Board, and they have come out with 3 types of requirements. The S1, which is basically directing the companies to what source of guidance and requires company to refer to the SASB standards. And S2 is basically setting out the requirements for climate-related disclosures. Now, there is an S3, which is a little more complicated, because it requires you to report even indirect effects of your business on the environment in terms of emissions and other things. Marcel, anything?
Thank you so much.
No, I think actually the principles are more or less the same than that we discussed in the presentation. So
Exactly.
the taxonomy is there, the scope on your own organization, your direct impact, and now the climate change. So they're adding the elements that make sense. There are slight differences in the way of questioning or the details.
Yeah.
But if you look at all these standards, there is a lot of similarity in the standards. So please keep that in mind when you pick a standard to adhere to.
Thanks, Marcel. Thanks. The next question is from Pawan Singh, and I think this is a very open-ended question, kind of a thing. And I will request Mr. Sanjeev, because he is the right person for this question, who can brief us based on his experience, assurance, and sustainability things. So Mr. Pawan Singh has asked that for assurance of the sustainability report, we need to keep sustainability report ready for the assurance process. For ESG rating, what kind of documents we need to prepare and keep ready for the rating? Means what they can do, that they think that they are ready now for the ESG thing. Mr. Sanjeev sir.
They need a governance policy, climate policy. We need the policies to be in place, system in place for environment policy, social accountability policy, governance policy. We have to put policies in place. Certification. For certification, we need manuals, policies, procedures in place, so that we can assess and do certification.
Very right. Very right. So I just sum it up, Mr. Pawan, that there are different policies and procedures that, okay, for the environmental side, for the social side, and the governance side, that, okay, where you are standing, and to meet up these requirements, what will be your footsteps, even baby steps, to change out that one, that, okay, what there is a thing which is identified, everyone aware of that one. For example, you are using fossil fuel or anything, that, okay, you're aware that this is something very important in the process of your manufacturing process of anything, for example. But how you are minimizing the carbon footprint or emissions, then what will be your policy, how you will move in your 5 years or next 10 years, whatever your baby steps, those policies. And then the certifications will be something that, okay, that will be something that, okay, which confirms that, okay, your policy is what you are doing, that practically it is doing that. That will help you to get good, or to meet the minimum threshold of the or eligible for the ESG rating, and then the ESG rating will come up for the final, as a final product, as a final document to share with the internal and external stakeholders. Thank you, Mr. Sanjeev. Francis, how can the ESG reach to the underdeveloped countries in the needs of ESG for company? Yes, Mr. Marcel, Mr. Nat, would you like to give? How can the ESG reach to the underdeveloped countries in the needs of ESG for company?
So, I mean, it's
To be
a
honest,
question of create. Sorry, go ahead, Master.
no. For me, the question is not completely clear what
Yeah.
Francis is exactly looking for. Because how can the ESG reach to the underdeveloped countries in the needs? So is it the companies in the underdeveloped countries, or is it companies who deal with underdeveloped countries and how they can collaborate? So if Francis could step in and clarify that, that would be highly appreciated.
Yes, Francis,
Or
you
maybe
can
Nat
write
has
your question again, or you can raise your come up and ask the question.
Yeah, I mean, I would say I would actually go back to Marcel and say it's. I mean, I just basically was going to say you need to create awareness in the countries that climate risk is real, and companies and people need to understand that, adjust their lifestyles to sustainable life living standards. And slowly, as the awareness grows, the companies, of course, we don't have time now, but still, you need to create the awareness to have it required. But like Marcel said, specify what your intent of the question is, and then we'll go through it.
Right. So Lydia Kabanda from Credit Info Uganda, you asked that, okay, this has been really informative. Coming from a credit bureau, I didn't quite understand how ESG plays in our industry. See, the bureaus are the source of information, the authentic information. You have the information. What is the bureau report that the score is good or score is bad? If the score is good, so there is a data that which kind of a companies they are maintaining their good credit scores, how they are able to continue or run their sustainable businesses, and where entities are having bad ratings. So what will be the effect? Might be it's a governance issue, might be it is some social issues that the products are not acceptable by the customer. The bureaus are the key areas where the investigation can be generated, or you can start your investigation. So bureaus have a very vital role, the information they are carrying, and then from there the case studies and study reports can be built up. Right. Tatanda, thank you so much. Thank you for joining. Thank you so much. Pawan Singh is asking how many years data are required for the ESG rating. I will leave with Nat and Marcel, but there's something that, okay, they in ESG, see, there are many areas where the historical data will not help you out to identify or kind of, it's the current areas that what whatever the policies or the strategies are built up, what is the investor point of view, and right now the positions over there, and then you can forecast over there. But I will also ask Ned and Marcel if they can put some light on that scene, on this point.
I mean,
Yeah,
How
so
many years of data will be required?
go ahead, go ahead.
So from an organizational point of view, and I leave the rating point of view to Nat, but if you build a solid system, you start from day one and not everything is there. So from the beginning, it doesn't matter how much you have. You start with building your strategy, policies, data collection. From an auditor perspective, what is important is to see how you progress, how have you implemented the policies, how have you embedded it in your procedures, in your daily way of working. So it can be beneficial if you have more than 1 year data, because else you have the risk that it looks like copy paste, and an auditor will look forward how you progress. Have you do the plan, do check, act cycle? Have you learned from the improvements you made? Have you adapt your policies? So if you have more than 1 year data, that's always better to look how your company behaves. And I think it's also more robust to the long term. But that's my view, what I would advise a company to be prepared for a rating.
Thanks.
I mean, in my
Next
view,
question from
like
Mr.
Mark,
Mohammed, that tapping ESG in lending business and product formulation is critical.
again, I didn't understand the question. Can we just have it again, please?
Yeah, just clarify that on thing. Pawan saying it's a simple question. Very useful insight. Pawan, I think you responded your question. It's a repetitive question, and I'm sure that you received you got your answer, right? If not, if you still need any clarification, please come out and speak if you have any you need any clarification. Robert, very useful insight concern ESG. Thanks for the presentation. Thank you, Robert. Then one only policy, not data, and data, but in ESG, data are also required. I think it's a continuation of Pawan saying that, okay, what information is required? So definitely data is also required. On the basis of that one, we need to assess on that side. So along with the policies, the data will be required, Mr. Net. There's a continuation in the question on Mr. Pawan saying that, okay, what information is required? So he's asking that only policy and data is also required on that side. So of course, definitely some data is also required on that side, which Marcel has now answered that question of the other gentleman.
Yeah. Basically, look, I mean, yes, for the ratings, you need the data. But to get the data, you need to have policies and procedures based on which you're going to compare what is in place and what is not. That's what the data is. So it's basically complementary. You need policies and procedures. If you have no policies and procedures in place, you clearly don't have anything. And you have to start from scratch.
Very nice. Augustine, yeah, that do you have management here in Benin? Right now, we don't have management in Benin, but we have presence in Nigeria and East African nations. I will assure you that we will reach out to you on one-to-one basis, and we'll keep our discussion with you. We'll take from there. Augustine from Benin, we will reach out to you. What document should I prepare for grading? Definitely, we will discuss it with you, and we will brief you all about on that one, and from there we'll take it on. Mr. Mohit has asked that, is there specific capital that is required for rating in ESG?
So,
Mr. Nat, Mr. Marcel, is there any specific capital or requirement of capital to do the ratings?
So, yeah, I guess you're talking about how much capital is there a minimum requirement for what is the size of the capital of the company? Now, the rating should be done based on what your specific requirement is. We explain to you what the benefits are. You get enhanced reputation, etc., and you get access to more markets. You will get access to cheaper capital, and cost. It will increase the value. So, but like I said, company can be sector specific or size. It depends on what you're looking for, what you want to achieve, and then it doesn't matter. There is no benchmark that if you're below 1 million, you can't do a rating. No. Does it make sense for you to do the rating? Do you plan to engage in business expansion, etc., where it will be beneficial for you and open up new markets, new sources of capital? That's when you would look at it. I don't think we have any such specific requirement that you should be minimum such size or such capital.
Right. So, Jimmy, as per IFRS 2, financial institutions required to report and disclose information related to climate-related risk. Will it be acceptable to ESG being incorporated on the same report? And he's talking about the scope 4. So, Netchi, will you be able to give the answer to Mr. Jimmy?
Again, like I said, we are more focused on ESG rating here, but to address your query, are you saying that because you are adhering to the IFRS 2 requirements, you should not be required to do a separate reporting? I think it depends on your geography. What are the requirements under various institutions, compliance requirements? So that question I cannot give a general answer to. But yes, I mean, if you reported IFRS 2 and there is no specific regulations in your geography, maybe.
Yeah, because the scope 4 is the financial risk, the handbook
Yeah.
you're talking about. So definitely these are the part of that one, and that's are going to be part of the audited financials. But ESG is not only for the financial risk. Just please understand, ESG is not only for the financial risk or the risk on the returns or risk on ROI or ROE. There are several more factors in ESG. We are way above, more important than the returns. Like this in society, what are you giving them, right? Like in governance side, how you're treating your employees, how the environment you have created, your products are about those are. So there are many areas where the financial aspects are not that much important. Those factors are more important than that one. So ESG globally are different overall. Yes, the IFRS 2, or you can say the scope 4, the carbon handprint, or you call it the financial risk due to climate changes. Yes, that part is linked with that one, and that's how it is coming with that side. I think we have reached to the end of this session. Dear participants, you have our details. We have sent that. Please feel free to reach out to us. You will receive an email with this one. So after this session, I will ask our COO, Ms. Javela Makalala, to give this closing remarks, and then we'll keep our day with other stuff. Yeah, Ms. Vela.
All right. Thank you.
you.
Thank you, Sishan. Thank you, Marcel. Thank you, Nat. And thank you, Mr. Sanjeev, for that wonderful presentation and explanation. So I won't be taking much of your time. Like what everyone has explained, ESG is a very good and interesting topic at this time. So the significance of ESG considerations has never been more evident as the world struggles with environmental and social issues like social inequality, climate change, and also governance failures. ESG is becoming a more and more significant part of corporate and financial institutions' operations since it can be used to manage risk, improve reputation, comply with regulation, spur innovation, and also expand capital availability. Again, it was our pleasure to have all of you here with us right now. So this concludes the webinar. Thank you all for attending. We hope you have learned and enjoyed attending this webinar as much as as much as we enjoyed putting it together. As always, we are ready to assist everyone in any way possible. If you have any further concerns after this, please get in touch with us anytime. We truly appreciate serving you and cannot wait to see where we go to the next level. Thank you again. Sishan?
Thank you.
So much. Thank you so much, Vela. So, people, we are reached almost the end of our journey. This is our global presence right now. You can please reach out to us. This is our management, our team. We have good specialists, and please note down our email addresses, our contact numbers, and reach out to us for any kind of a query. And please stay in touch with us in our thank you emails. We will share our free membership links. Just register over there so you can receive next episode details or the other topics like loan and syndication, like for the banking sector, Basel and IFRS. They have specialists, our speakers, we are arranged for this sector. And there are so many other topics for microfinances, for insurance sector, for exchange houses, for corporates, everywhere we are doing our webinars on a regular basis. So it will help you to stay in touch with us. Thank you so much, everyone. Special thanks to Marcel. Special thanks to Natvora to giving such a wonderful presentation and information. And of course, more and more, special thanks to our participants. From 48 countries, people registered with us in hundreds. And that is something we are very much motivated. And we will bring better topics, better presentation information next time for you. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a good day ahead. I will say some areas good morning, some areas good afternoon, and some areas good evening, and might be some areas good night. So have a good time. Thank you so much.
Have a lovely
Thank you,
day.
everyone.
Yeah,
Bye-bye.
thank you, everyone.